Well, one of her favorites.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Demario is online with us. We'll go ahead and kick off and get started today. Today is the 7th week of the 10-week semester. You're at home this week. You're doing Zoom on Saturday, case study gathering. You were to pick one of the cases, 3, 4, or 5, and follow the directions, prompts, and do the discussion questions. That'll be your presentation this morning. Of course, later this weekend, you will do your reflection. Next week, week 8, we will not meet. We will not be online. You will be reading the AIRS book and doing those discussion boards. Your optional is the last minutes in Salkind. The following week, week 9, July 16th through 22nd. Again, you'll be home. That week you'll be doing the Quant's book. Davenport, and your optional will be a 100-question program evaluation test on the 14 chapters of Royce, the program evaluation book. And then the last week, week 10, we'll be back online Saturday morning, the 28th at 9 a.m. Case study, give feedback. Again, your PowerPoint and reflection. Please remember that all work is due. You'll need to take your final exam sometime that week. All work is due by the 30th. If you do work after the 30th, between then and graduation, I'll still count it, but make sure that you have everything done. Had an issue last semester with a student who, at the last day of class, didn't have enough points to pass, and she worked that week after the last day of class before graduation while Blackboard was still open. She got her points, but then she couldn't understand why she got a deduction in her grade. Well, if you turn your work in late, that's what happens. So make sure I'll take work up until they shut Blackboard down, and I'm guessing they'll do that the day after graduation, as they always do. But the semester is over on Monday, July the 30th. So if you want full credit for your work's got to be in by Monday, July 30th. That doesn't mean I won't take work until graduation on Saturday or the following Monday when they close it down, but it's just not going to be full value, because I have to turn grades in, and I have to base my decision on what's in there. All right, so that's the housekeeping. We'll get that out of the way. Anybody have any questions on the next 3 weeks going forward? Again,
what's the name of the AIRS book?
Super Crunchers.
Okay. Sorry.
You can, yeah, that's it.
I think I didn't get that book. Okay, I didn't get it, but I'll get it.
You can get it, or you can order through audio book.
Yeah.
If you're on campus Monday, I can probably scare you up a copy. I've probably got one somewhere in my office. I'll be there Monday morning. We've got a meeting at 10. But other than that, I'll be there Monday. And if you want to, if you will shoot me an email, I'll see if I've got one and I can run it over to you.
Well, that's okay. I'll leave Sunday morning. I'll find one.
Oh, you leaving Sunday morning?
Yeah, I'll find one.
Oh, I hate to interrupt your vacation schedule.
I'll find one.
I think she was dying to take that to the beach. I mean, she'd be the coolest cat on the beach if she could.
Yeah.
I needed to take
I'm telling you, that's a great summer read. I'm not making this up. You'll love that book.
I know. I wanted to take. You think the library has one?
No, I don't think they've got anything from this century.
Okay.
Lamb.
I'm going to stop by there and see.
Did I say that out loud? I was just supposed to think that.
I'm going to look it up and see.
You can look it up and see. So here, in preparation for this question, here are the books. I had this already loaded in case anybody had any questions. So here are the official names of the books.
Yeah, I got them all but that one. I don't know why I missed that one.
All right. Okay. All right. So here we go. Let's see what I've got loaded here. Okay. Here are the cases that and here's the exercise itself. Data gathering. You were to pick one of the cases, 3, 4, or 5, and conduct an interview. And you had different roles, and then you had your questions, your discussion questions. You had 5 of those. So that's what you'll consist of this morning. Looking at the cases, let me see. Case line about Jim. The second case number 4, was utilize exploratory qualitative data collection in small organizations, and the other one was identifying the scope of work at Dixie Weaving. So those were your 3 subjects that you could pick to do your interviews with. All right. Who's going to be first?
Who said something?
Who's
I
going
thought
to
I
go
heard
first?
somebody.
Who?
We're happy to, but we went first last time if they want to. If not,
so you get to go first again, I guess. Who's
Okay.
going to be the host?
Me. Tammy. Hey. Okay. I'm seeing you.
Good. Well, not good for you, but at least the technology is working.
Yay.
Sometimes that's not always a good thing.
That's right. Okay. Let me just be sure my screen is ready. And then I will share. Whoops. No, I can't do that. Let's see. Let me come back to. Okay. Hopefully it's coming to you now.
It's coming.
Yay.
We have a musical interlude by Carmen
No.
while our screen is coming. Okay. I've shared it. Are y'all seeing it?
Uh-huh.
We are. Dixie Weaving.
Dixie Weaving. There we go. So can I? Okay. Now I can make it big. Okay. We ready to roll?
We are.
Carmen?
Yes.
M.A.?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We're on go. Well, this is the exercise 3 data gathering, and we did use the Dixie Weaving case study. So we'll go here. So the background of the case, in case you're not familiar with it, is that Dixie Weaving is a fabric weaving company based in the southeastern United States. They actually had a plant in Chattanooga where I grew up, so I think that's why this one kind of caught my eye. Dixie Weaving was experiencing a 40% turnover rate in their employees. They have 1,500 employees running 2 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. Many of the employees speak English as their second language. And on an initial site visit, several areas of concern came up. The working conditions, it was extremely hot in there in the summer, training issues, meeting quotas, communication, safety issues, and then manufacturing process interruptions. So just on an initial visit, these were the things that kind of came out. So some considerations just looking at the case from the vantage point of consultants would be that we would want to clarify, how we could get information about policies and procedures as well as specific reports, OSHA, that kind of thing that we might want to look at. Also, we need to really be clear on who can be interviewed or surveyed and what can be shared with these employees about the process. And then also we want to be sure to allow adequate time for data gathering, observation, document review, and recommendations. I know in the case study in the book, it seemed like they were going to do all of that in 4 weeks, depending on how many people needed to be interviewed and how much the company was going to let us into the plant, how we were going to set up the interviews would determine if that could all be done in 4 weeks. I was concerned that that might not be the case. So our learning objectives are really to practice gathering data through individual interviews, also to understand the challenges of developing a comprehensive data collection strategy, and then to recognize the importance of identifying key data sources and the appropriate data collection methodologies.
Okay, so criteria for good interview questions. We looked at the information from Patton and the Miriam text. Ask good questions. Practice by using pilots. Practice makes perfect, so continue to practice and use open-ended questions. Ask follow-up questions. Include, let them share their opinion and how they feel about the questions. Give them time to answer. Ask questions using familiar language. Use words that reflect the interviewee's worldview. And in the case of Dixie Weaving, there were employees there that used English as their second language, so it could be that you may have to get an interpreter to be on standby. Ask probing questions: who, what, when, where, and tell me more about that. And ask different types of questions. Patton had 6 different types of questions, and I sort of matched the questions that our interviewer asked in the categories. So he says experience and behavior questions are good to ask. Can you tell me more about the day-to-day responsibilities of your position as plant manager? Was one of the questions. Opinion and values questions. What do you think are the most important qualities for someone to excel in the role of plant manager? Ask feeling questions. What do you feel are the biggest challenges facing the company right now? Knowledge questions. How does your position support the company's missions, goal, and protected success? And ask sensory questions. Tell me more about what you do in your position as plant manager. And of course, background and demographic questions. Why did you decide to work at this location? When the interviewer asked this question, the interviewee described a little bit more about their background. So criteria for good interview questions, we looked at some do's and don'ts. So do use language that is sensitive to positions, environments, and cultures. Language interpreter may be necessary. And before you use that too, you have to meet with an interpreter to make sure they also have that sensitivity. Do use active listening skills, paraphrasing, summarizing, encouraging. You want to have good eye contact and respect their space as well. Use observation skills. Note inconsistencies in story. Sometimes you might have to ask for clarification without being too challenging that might turn them off. So note their comfortability level. Continue if you see they're getting upset. Give them time to regroup. Use open body language. Encouragers like nodding, leaning forward, and again, good eye contact and respecting their personal space. Use self-reflection all the while during the interview. If I were the one being interviewed, would I be comfortable asking these questions? I mean, continue to try to put yourself in their shoes and try to understand. You can't know how they feel, but try to understand how they may feel. And some of the don'ts, don't use multiple questions. The interviewee will feel interrogated and on the defense. If you're too anxious to ask their questions and maybe you cut them off and you ask another question before they can get finished, they will start to get defensive or shut down. Don't use leading questions. This might cause the interviewee to answer a question to please the interviewer. They're going to try to answer the questions the way you want them to answer it, and that's not a true interview. You need them to be open and honest. Don't use yes or no questions. Those are closed-ended. You won't get enough information, and the dialogue will not open. Don't use closed body language. Don't sit with your arms crossed and in a defensive position. It puts them, makes them uncomfortable, and they won't be able to establish a good rapport and a relationship with you, which is very important. And don't use language that voices your own opinions. Don't give them your opinion and lead them off, and they may not be able to open up and answer because they're afraid they're going to not please you. This is not about you.
So, as the interviewer, by Patton, that's the process that we use for determining the type of opening questions. In our particular case, in the Bass Dixie Weaving, as the interviewer, I was to interview In the case, his name is actually Mike, but in our particular scenario, our interviewee is Tammy. And as the interviewer, it was my position to use what I call the STAR method of interviewing to make sure that we have open-ended questions and to display those 5 types of categories in which Patton had given us to be able to make the interviewee feel comfortable. However, in our case, Carmen was our note taker, and as I stated earlier, Tammy was our interviewee, and I was the interviewer. The questions needed to be in a method that could actually determine what STAR interview method puts forward. First is the situation, then there's the task, the action, and results. So my experience as the interviewer, looking at the STAR method, it appeared that at first, because we had established that the interviewee would be Mike, the plant manager. Well, based on our note-taking experience, Carmen will explain later the process that we used. And of course, we did it through a Zoom session. And at first, the interviewee felt, I took it that they felt selfish or uninterested at first, or that they had, as the interviewee, more work to do because they were worried about the 40% turnover rate as opposed to maybe the cultural experience. With the task, I tried to ask the questions that you saw earlier that would state that how can we help make our culture better, and how can we actually know what the task and what I call task, condition, and standard, the desired results that we were trying to reach to fix our criteria situation that was mentioned earlier by Tammy when she explained what our problems were within the plant. Third, the action was to try to smile and be at ease and allow periods of silence for the interviewee to have the opportunity to try to think about the questions. And I tried to make sure that in the task that they understood their role as plant manager was important and a vital position that was a leadership role, that they needed to understand that, in fact, what they do, other people are watching them. And last, as I stated about the open-ended questions, we were to make sure that there was ownership of what all the problems were that were identified earlier in the case.
Okay, and as the interviewee, some of the things that I experienced were that the interviewer started the questions without really introducing the process or the other person's role, which was Carmen, the note taker. The questions were methodical and the interviewer was very efficient, so really did not feel like my time was wasted. I was asked open-ended questions rather than yes or no, and the interviewer listened carefully to my answers without giving biased opinions or feedback. I might have revealed more information if I had been asked to explain further or for an example of what I was talking about.
Okay, so as a note taker, of course the conversation moved faster than my fingers on the keyboard. And so that was a challenge for me. And other challenges in my role as note taker was just watching the body language. I tried to make a note of the body language. I didn't pick up on anyone being standoffish, but I did pick up on a lot of ums and pauses in speech. So a challenge for me was discerning whether or not to put all those in my notes, or sometimes a pause is important. So I tried to put those in when I thought it was important. And just pressure not to miss anything important was also a challenge. And I did have a couple of times where it was necessary to interrupt either the interviewee or the interviewer at a good time to repeat a statement or get some clarification. After the interview, I was able to reread my notes and identify some of the themes that were in the interview. So some of the themes that I found were that the plant manager's focus was mainly on moving product. The plant manager was not savvy about the issue with turnover, and that follows with the case. You know, all he was concerned about there was, you know, I'm going to get in trouble, let's get this fixed. The plant manager was uncomfortable with questions regarding the culture and future of the organization. I thought Tammy done well in that role. Overall, the transcript of the interview reflected the questions and answers accurately. It needed some polishing. When I got finished with grammar, I was surprised at how much I needed to correct there. But the finished product was good. I felt good about it after it was over.
So some conclusions that we came to from the data gathering case study were to try to put persons being interviewed at ease, explain the process, how long it will take, and ask a simple question first so that they can sort of get into the flow of the interview. Choose carefully who to interview. The least expected person may have the best data. I had chosen to be Mike, the plant manager, but as we actually went through the exercise, I'm not sure that he was the person that really had the most critical data. Of course, if we were the consultants going into something like this, you would have to interview the plant manager, but I just felt like something I learned out of this experience was if you only get a certain number of interviews, choose carefully who to interview because, as I said, the least expected person may have the best information that will be helpful. Have plenty of questions ready, but be willing to go off script if you find the person has key insights in a particular area. Ask follow-up questions, ask for clarification, or ask for an example. Record the interview if at all possible. This will put the note taker at ease and allow for deeper analysis at a later time. Guide the conversation with your questions and paraphrase when necessary if you need to keep the interviewee on subject. Be reassuring with your responses and body language as the person answers questions. Be appreciative of their time, their answers, and their willingness to be a part of the solution by sharing their insights. So, any questions from the group?
All right. Very good. All right. I'm going to take back reclaim the host.
Okay.
I am going to share screen, desktop, go here. And let's look at this. All right. As I told you last week, qualitative is about the why, W-H-Y. Quantitative is about the what and how. It's about the numbers. Now, what I want to make sure that you understand is the reason why that you are at Dixie Weaving is in this first paragraph. The reason why you're there is turnover. It's not directly about the what or the how in terms of the numbers, production, and all that, but it's about the turnover rate, which is a number. So what you're doing here is you're using qualitative methods to try to determine why this quantitative number is at 40%, which is a bad number. You know, the purpose of a consultant is to make a good number go up or a bad number go down. This is a bad number. We want this bad number to go down. So the quantitative work has already been done when we get there. Quantitative work is you got 40% turnover rate. We feel like that may affect our production, our efficiency. And so you come in to ask the why. Why is it down? Now, the thing to remember in practical situations is this is the purpose that you're there for. This guides the content of your questions. Let me say that again. the purpose for you being there when you're coming in to do qualitative work, the purpose of you there guides your qualitative questions, your interview questions. Make sure that you don't come in with a, now you folks have focused on the process today. All curriculum is process and content. All curriculum is content and process. You have focused on process today, making sure your questions are open-ended, body language, all those kinds of things. That is where, that's the starting point. That's the nuts and bolts of interviewing. But the second level of interviewing is to make sure that the content of your questions is aligned for the purpose or the reason that you are there. You're not there just for general data gathering. How do you feel? How do you like this place? Those may be part of that, but you're trying to figure out why the turnover rate is 40%. Now, that may guide some general categories of questions. They do need to be open-ended, and people need to define the things, but you need to probably have 3 or 4 general notions of why turnover rate is high in manufacturing settings. That would be research that you would do as the consultant, and develop your questions around those themes. Again, you say, well, Dale, you're contradicting yourself. You say when you're doing qualitative work, you let the themes define themselves, but you got to have some general categories. You've got to have some general categories. Otherwise, it's a fishing expedition, and your data set will be so large, you'll never be able to corral it and make it into usable themes. I know that's kind of putting your thumb on the scale. You've got to be careful with your bias there. But I would look at the top 10 reasons why people leave manufacturing environments, and I would develop questions around those to make sure that I do that. One of the things that I do for master students is I have them do basically an interview situation with a focus group about gaps in communication.
About what?
Gaps in communication.
Oh, gaps.
Gaps in communication. And it's kind of a trap. And most of them will assume right past the problem and get into parent participation, those kinds of things, not understanding that the barriers to parent participation are communication. And the questions that they ask go right past the crux of the problem, that we don't have any kind of communication system set up with these people. And so that's the mistake that they can make. And so it's not a trick. I mean, I tell them, you're going to do gaps in communication. You're going to interview these people about gaps in communication, and they won't even start there. They'll start with why these people aren't participating. They'll have everything in the world except for the first piece is, are we sure that we're communicating with them well? They'll just assume right past the problem. In this case, it's very similar in that if you don't have some questions, your content of your questions don't speak directly to turnover rate, you may assume right past the problem and be interviewing people about things that don't really affect turnover rate. One of the problems is anybody figured out from the Hertzberg model of motivation, has anybody figured out why you're at a disadvantage in this particular case? Thinking back to Hertzberg, satisfiers and dissatisfiers. Does anybody think about what the disadvantage that you would be at as a consultant going into this case?
Well, we know there may be language barriers.
Well, but thinking about Hertzberg's motivational theories of satisfiers and dissatisfiers. Here's the question.
It seems there's a lot of dissatisfiers. I mean, the long shifts, the heat. I mean, I don't know how anybody could hold up.
Yeah.
You'll be hitting low morale a lot.
But think about this from a conceptual framework perspective. You're not interviewing the people that left. Who are you interviewing?
People still there.
People that stayed. That's a disadvantage.
Okay.
That's your disadvantage. Conceptual framework wise is we would get much better, much richer data if we asked people why they left. Basically, you're asking people who stayed why they stayed. And so what we really need in this, so you're at a distinct disadvantage.
Okay.
When you're trying to figure out why people are leaving, when you ask people who are staying, that's a problem in consulting. But a lot of times you can't track down the people who left. So your questions have to be about what dissatisfies you in the current environment and what's important, what would make you leave. But again, we're assuming population and sample here. We're assuming that these groups are equivalent, that the same things that made the folks who already left leave would be the same things that would make the people who are now there leave. That may not be the case. That may not be the case. To find out why people are leaving, what we really need to do is we need a different sample. We need the people who left. That would be much richer data as to the why. Why did you leave? See, you're asking questions basically, why are you staying? You need to be asking questions, why did you leave? But we may not have access to them. And so from a theoretical, conceptual perspective, we're behind, we're not in an optimum situation to begin with, because we're asking the people who stayed, and they have different characteristics than the people who left.
Well, I'm guessing this is common when a company would bring you in.
Absolutely. It's always going to be your problem, because you have to make the assumption that the same things, that people dislike the same things. That's a pretty big assumption. That's why you've got to do research and find, the content of your questions have to be more about what would make you leave than what makes you stay. Obviously the conditions are bad. We know that, but they're staying anyway. So we can't just chalk it up to conditions, because they're staying.
Right.
So understand content and process. Your process is perfect. You've done an excellent job. But the content of your questions is influenced by the notion, the conceptual framework that we're asking people who stayed rather than people who went. So we've got to try to, through our questions, the content of our questions, we've got to try to figure out, maybe, do these people know why they left? Did you have friends that left? What reasons did they leave? Why do you stay? But what would make you go? That's a different set of questions than we can't just continue to try to figure out why people stay. We need to try to figure out why they went, or why people are going. And maybe through the people who stayed, we can maybe find some themes there. But if I was walking into this person's office and he said the turnover rate's 40%, I would say, well, first thing I'd ask, is there any way that I could find access to the people who left? Did you have a name or a number? Did you do, could we set up ongoing, do you have some sort of ongoing exit interview with people? Because that's the most relevant data rather than the people who stayed. Think about this in terms of, again, I'm not throwing dirt on the place where I work, but think about this in terms of the voluntary separation that Gardner-Webb did. People who were dissatisfied might have stayed because they didn't have any other options. Usually when you have a voluntary, it's not the worst employees that leave, it's the best employees, because they have other options. And it may be that there's the same thing here. It may be that the people are leaving this particular job because they have other options, and that they're not, and the people that are staying are dissatisfied with the working conditions as well, but they don't have other options. That's a whole nother set of issues for the company, though. Nobody likes working here, and as soon as they can find something better, they leave. But that's a leap that you would have to make by talking to the people who left and comparing that data with the people who stayed to see if there's common themes, and that leaving is just simply based on opportunity. They all hate it, but it's just based on leaving is based on opportunity. So that may speak to salary compensation more than working conditions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you see, qualitative is, man, it's like trying to pin Jell-O to the wall. That's why I tell you, I'm not a qualitative person. It's not cut and dried enough for me. Remember, qualitative is about making the world make sense. I'm not sure that I can't make the world make sense through qualitative methods. I understand all the issues. I understand I'm a practitioner. I can do the ins and outs of it, but it's not as clear as the numbers. And this is one of these cases that you picked here, that you've only got access to the satisfied. You don't, that's the people who stay. So that puts you at a disadvantage from the very beginning. So the focus here is make sure you're using good technique, which you did. But the overarching concept here is we've got to find some content to our questions that gets at to why people are leaving here. And we'll have to apply these to the people that are staying, and then we'll have to kind of interpret that and make it and try to make it make sense. But you need some themes to your questions that get at people leaving. All right.
So
does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So as far as Hertzberg goes, yeah. So are we looking at? So we're asking the satisfiers, dissatisfiers of the employees, not of us.
Yeah. Whenever you're looking at why people stay or leave a job, you're looking at Hertzberg.
Okay.
That's the foundation. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's newer than that and more in depth and a lot more higher level. But job satisfaction in terms of staying and going, that conceptual framework always traces back to Hertzberg's motivational theories. His motivational theories were about staying and going in your job.
Okay.
And that is, that's some of that industrial stuff, the Westinghouse stuff that came out of, the 30s and 40s and 50s as to why people stay or leave their jobs. Okay. Hertzberg is the guru. He's the genesis of that. He's the starter. It all goes back to his conceptual framework. There are satisfiers that make you stay and dissatisfiers that make you go.
Okay.
And you make a mistake when you're working on the wrong side of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I have a doctoral student out in rural northeastern North Carolina, and she knows why people leave, but she's doing her work on the people that stayed to try to find out why they stay and see if we can do more of that. We can't change the location. See, many of the things that make people go, we can't change.
Right.
We can't change it. This is a manufacturing environment. That's what we do. We make widgets. Can't change that. We can't move it to some other place, or we can't change what we do. This is who we are and what we do. Well, just like the district that she's working in out in northeastern North Carolina, we can't change its location. It is where it is. We can't change the wealth of the district. We can't change that there's no towns out there that they can't even get a cell phone signal most days, and that there's the internet is spotty, and that it's rural and there's no towns nearby, a decent place to get dinner. We can't change that part. That's why people leave. Well, we know that. That's a duh. But we can't change that.
Mm-hmm.
We need to talk to the people who are staying, and so that we can capitalize on those. Maybe we can accentuate or amplify the reasons that they stay to get more people to stay. but we can't change the reason that they leave. In this environment here, in this particular case study, we can't change that this is a manufacturing environment. We can't just all of a sudden start organic farming so people will be happy. That's not what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to make sure you're working on the right side here, you know, of the Hertzberg conceptual framework. And that's always when you're talking about staying and going, job satisfaction, turnover rate, you're always working off the Hertzberg model, always.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty. Who's next? Very good job. Who's it going to be?
I think Di Mario will be the host.
Yeah.
All righty.
For our case study, we use the case of wine. So I think that was like case number 3. And so just a little bit about the background. So Mr. Conrad Maines is the owner. And so he took over for his father after over 10 years ago. And so some of the issues that they have right now are they have 50% of their customers are one-time shoppers, but the other 50 come through word of mouth. And so usually these people are those one-time people that come in. And so they're trying to figure out ways to keep those folks to continue to come. They've also had some turnover rate as well when it comes to their younger group of employees. They've kept most of their senior employees, like their managers and things like that, but it's the ones that are the entry level ones that have been in and out. And so, and his main goal is that he wants everyone to feel like a family, whether they're the ones that are working there or the customers that come in. And so some of those central issues are a lack of a shared vision, which all leads into the rest of these points with communication. We're looking at some of his staff meetings that he's had, some of the messages that some of his employees have received. We're also looking at leadership and organizational structure. And so one thing about this case study, it provided a more mechanical structure where this could be more of an organic. So we're trying to look at that. And then also the culture of the company. I'm trying to understand a little bit more behind what makes this company tick. What are the good and the great things that are going on, but then what are those areas of improvement? And so with our roles, Razan was the note taker. And so I was the interviewee. So I was Conrad. And then Rebecca was Dr. Michaels. And so that's just kind of giving you a quick overview of who kind of did what during our interview process.
So I will just quickly pull a few questions that we went over. First thing, I wanted to start with asking Mr. Maine, why was it important for him to bring in an outside consultant? I felt like it would be a good reason to start with that, just to kind of understand his point of view, and maybe he can give me, in his words, why he felt like an outside consultant was important. So I wanted to lead with that, just to kind of see where he was coming from and to see which direction we need to take. I thought it was important to ask him what his work style was, because while we were reviewing the case study, we could tell that it seemed like there was a lot of tension between him and maybe managers or subordinate staff. So I kind of wanted to get an idea of what his work style was like compared to the atmosphere that which was described about the winery. And then another question is, how would he describe the quality of those relationships with subordinates? I felt like that was important because, again, just the behavior and the verbal cues that other people are giving us, or the nonverbal cues about how people were just interacting with each other. I felt like that was very interesting, and I kind of wanted to dig some into that. And maybe he could give us his personal interpretations for why he had high turnover rate, and then how he would like to see his role in the future. So those are just a few of the questions that I asked. So when creating the questions, it wasn't too difficult. I tried to keep them consistent and open-ended, and that was probably the most difficult about it. It's just making sure that I created questions that were open-ended that Mr. Main would be able to answer, and we can get really descriptive details and figure out what might be going on within the winery. I feel like I kind of in hindsight would have liked to either ask questions to other people, just to kind of get their ideas of why maybe things are the way that they are. And then maybe going forward, started with Mr. Main and then work down the organizational chart, working with, people that are there just seasonal time. Just I would like to spend more time outside of Mr. Main. So that is just my hindsight thoughts. Maybe we could pull some more data from other employees.
And then also understand that those questions are going to change throughout too. And so that's kind of one of the difficult things too, is making sure that you keep those open-ended questions whenever you start using your probing questions. But sometimes your probing questions can be more direct, just depending on what on how those questions go. So I was the interviewee. One of the things that I was thinking about it as I was, and this is even if I was the interviewee when it comes to a job or anything like that, is making sure that you feel, if I felt great about the experience, but also underprepared. So, making sure that if I was Mr. Main, I would have, those things like the mission, I would have, my surveys and stuff already there. I would have a number of these things ready to go, to be able to ask those questions. And so it's definitely different when one of the things I always think about is whenever you're talking about someone's company, you of course want to make sure that those questions are open-ended too, so that way no one feels offended at the beginning. So I thought about if this could have went a different way, how would I have felt. The interviewer did a good job when it came to asking those questions. The tone was great. There's no interruptions. I felt that I was speaking and that she was listening. And again, being more prepared, well thought out some of those answers. I'm thinking about repetition and shorter answers for some specific questions too, would be helpful.
So the interviewer perspective, like I previously said, just in retrospect, I wish that I would have spent more time with other employees, either current or not current. That would be my suggestion to acquire more data. So I think just when we initially read the case study, I was really focused on Mr. Main. But I do think that going forward, I would like to reach out to more employees. So maybe this could just be like the beginning stages of our time with the winery. But I definitely feel like it would be more useful to talk to either current, former employees. Why are they leaving? Why are they staying? So that is just my perspective as a consultant. And I felt like that I was trying to probe for information and help resolve a problem within the winery. I really did try to come up with questions that were open-ended and that maybe he could explore a little more of why he felt there was a problem, or just kind of get to the root cause of the issue. So I did try to come up with questions that will kind of make him think a little further, instead of just saying, hey, we have a problem, how can you fix it? I kind of wanted him to kind of dig a little deeper, but still feel comfortable at the same time.
All right. For me, as a note taker, it wasn't an easy experience at all, because I felt myself like a record, or I have to take care of each word. So it wasn't an easy mission. It needs fully understand of the interview subject and the environment, and it needs to get attention to every word and write everything thoroughly. Thus, the note taker must be a really trustworthy person to do so, and he should or she should to have like a image about the subject and the people. So he can write everything and ask about further information if needed. So it's not easy mission. It really need get attention, be careful about everything, ask for further information, use a record. I really wish if I record the interview, because sometimes I cannot just write everything quickly as they say it. So it will be much better if I have something to record it. And that's it. Now, some of the lessons and from this interview, it was like, just a minute. We have to prepare for the interview, and we should make like introduction to break the ice when you start your interview, like ask about his day and how it was and how you feel and something like this, just to break the ice. Prepare your question carefully, reduce the stress, and ask for a real solution. That's it.
Very good. All right. Let me reclaim the host. Okay. All right. Question one, I like that question in that you asked them why they felt the need to have a consultant. In the first case study with Dixie Weaving, your purpose as a consultant was pretty clear. You said our problem's 40% turnover rate, go. Now, it gets difficult after that, but at least you know what your purpose is. Now, this one, I'm not sure that I know exactly why I've been called as a consultant. And so your question number one was most appropriate. Why did you call me? There are 5 particular problems that are addressed in this case study. And you've got to pin some of these things down when you're a consultant. Here are the things that are that could be the reason why I'm here, but you got to tell me. The first is profitability. Sales have been sluggish. Production's been good though. So are we here because of profitability? What about market share? Is it because profitability is sometimes is not so much about market share, it's about efficiencies within the organization or in the production methodology. Market share is about, we're doing fine on the production side. We just need to sell more of our stuff. That's 2 different things. Both of them are financial issues, but profitability speaks to your cost per unit of production. Market share has to do with, doesn't have a thing in the world to do with that. It has, why aren't we selling this on the other end? We're very efficient in our production. Our production's been good. So it's not really about it's about money in the end, but it's more about market share. So is it about profitability? Do you need to assess your production capabilities and the process that leads up to putting it in the bottle? Or do we start from there and figure out why it's not selling? That's a market share issue. Are we interested in culture issues in terms of employee satisfaction? or employee turnover rate. We know that the young people don't stay. Is that an issue? Is that something that we need to explore? And then the last is customer satisfaction with people who are coming to our facility to taste wine. Those are 5 problems that I perceive in this case study. And what you need to ask the person, the president of Resolute Winery, is, which of these is most important to you? Why am I here? Why did you feel the need to hire me as a consultant? These are 5 very diverse and different things. You know, running down all 5 of these is going to be a major issue. You know, you got to get that person to focus and tell you, why am I here?
What can I ask the 5? So I got market share, profitability, customer satisfaction, and culture. I must have missed one.
Turnover rate of the millennials.
Thank you.
Got 5 problems here that this case study has defined for you. As I said, the Dixie Weaving one is the easy one. They told you up front, we're only interested in the 40% turnover rate. We don't give a hoot about the rest. You don't have to worry about profitability or market share or margins or any of that. We just need you to work on that 40% turnover rate. Although that's not easy, at least you know why you're there, your purpose for being there. I mean, as Rebecca pointed out, first thing you got to do when you sit down with Mr. Main here is figure out why he hired you. See, that's excellent. Question number 1 was excellent. Why am I here? You've got 5 problems. Which of these 5 do you want me to address? And if you want me to address all 5, I'm going to be here a while. I might have to bring on some additional people. I can't do all 5 of these as a consultant. And again, we go back to that Chinese wall. If we've got 5 different problems, some of them are quantitative, some of them are qualitative. What do we have to make sure that we do? We have to separate them. We can't have the same people working on all 5 problems because it kind of runs together and our bias shows. So when we start looking at, you see, profitability is a quantitative, those are quantitative metrics. We need a group working on that to see how efficient your production is, your harvest, you know, all the things that you're doing. Do you have your irrigation automated? All those kinds of things in your vineyards. Profitability, market share is a marketing, you know, is marketing. That's a different set of circumstances. Qualitative, we get into employee satisfaction, culture, climate. Culture is overall, climate's measurable. Culture is really not. Turnover rate, that's a whole nother issue. Again, we've got on the Hertzberg model, we got to try to find out why those people left. You've got 5 different strong problems here that are going to require qualitative and or quantitative methodologies. You got to have this person define for you why I'm here. Do you want to tackle all 5? I'm going to have to bring a team in. Or which one of these is most important to you that I can help you with? Because what you don't want to happen as a consultant is they bring you in, you perceive the problem to be one thing, you address that problem, and when you get done, they're angry or they're not happy because that wasn't really the thing they wanted fixed at all. They wanted something else fixed. They didn't bother to tell you. Or they thought that by fixing the thing that you fixed, it would fix the real problem, and many times it doesn't. In this case, getting people to stay longer in their job may not fix their market share problem at all, or their customer satisfaction of the people that are walking in and doing the wine tasting. Keeping angry people that don't like working there is not really a good idea for customer satisfaction. Yeah, we now keep all these angry millennials, but that didn't fix our customer satisfaction problem. Well, that's 2 different things. So back to question 1, you've got to clearly define why I'm here. This was an easy one at Dixie Weaving. They told you you're here because of 40% turnover rate. Go. This one, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure why they called you. They've got problems. They need a consultant. but you can clearly define 5 problems in this case study. You've got to pin them down on which one is it you want me to work on. After that, your methodology is great. I mean, you went right through the process, but in the initial, you've got to ask, why am I here? And that's for all consultancy. When you're coming in to do qualitative work, you have to make sure, you can't assume that you know why you're here. Why am I here? What is the outcome that you desire? What do you want me to work with you to help you with? Otherwise, you end up in Abilene in the heat of July. In business school, they have what's known as the Abilene paradox. An Abilene paradox is about not communicating clearly with client system. You know, I thought you wanted to go to Abilene and you thought I wanted to go to Abilene, when in fact nobody wants to go to Abilene in July, or pretty much ever. But that's how we ended up in Abilene in July, was I thought you wanted this and you thought that I wanted that, and that's how we ended up in Abilene. And it's called the Abilene paradox. And that's what I'm talking about here. You thought that I was going to fix this, and I thought you wanted me to fix that. And so in the end, we're both unhappy. We're both in Abilene in unbelievable heat in the summertime. You know, that's metaphor. But in business school, you learn about the Abilene paradox, and that's the issue here. Is you better define what they want, or you'll put out a lot of work, time, and effort, and they won't be happy because it wasn't what they really wanted. You didn't bother to ask. You assumed. So here's the final question for the day. Looking at this case study, and those of you who didn't do it are at a disadvantage, but it's more a theoretical question anyway. What's the most pressing need for this place? That's one of the things that I make students do in the master's program all the time, is kind of so that they don't assume past the problem and start working on something down the road. What is the most pressing need here?
Dr. Lamb, I'm kind of torn between either their sales and the retention, and I don't know. It's like I keep going between those two, because I feel like the profitability is very important, but also if they don't have satisfied employees, then they're going to continue to lose customers. So it's kind of like they go hand in hand. So I'm thinking maybe they should address their issues with employees first, because it is ultimately affecting the customer satisfaction and potentially their sales. That's what I think, but I'm still kind of going back and forth between.
Okay.
I would agree, just because I think about that one instance where I think the consultant was in and she was waiting to get some wine, and whoever the person, Diane, was not, I can't remember if it was Diane or Jillian, but one of them wasn't allowed to pour wine because they poured too much. And so she had to call for someone else, or they couldn't bring out other wine without Julian's permission. So she would have to take certain wine off the listing for the day because she wasn't allowed to go open another box. There was like some of those employees.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
I just to add something about the take noter, the note taker. Actually, I really prefer that if they bring someone else, not the interviewer, at himself, because he will be focused on some issues. But if you bring someone from outside, he will take everything. So when you repeat it, you will see something you never see it when you were asking. So it's important to bring someone else to take this notes it will let you see the vision or the image from the other side.
Okay. All right. All right. So the answer to the question that I ask is market share. What's the job of the leader of the organization? What's your number one job?
Save the organization.
Save the organization, to keep it alive. Now, market share has to do with all these other things as well. It has to do with customer satisfaction. But you've got to be interested in market share. Yes, we want happier employees, and they had some management issues, some routines, some things that could be fixed. But the bigger issue there was market share. And so always remember, it's about keeping the place alive, saving the organization. Their real fundamental issue at the winery here at Resolute Winery is market share. There's a lot of things that contribute, but the fundamental is their production is fine. They've got all that, but the issue now is market share. But overall, for today, the thing that I would suggest to you, that I suggest to all doctoral students, is in the course of your terminal work, whether it be a consultancy project or a dissertation, seek professional help in coding, whether it's the software or a person, but record all interviews. You miss a lot taking notes. You just do. Even if you're good at it, you miss a lot. Record all interviews and then get professional help, either through that software, that Caddis software, or a professional transcriber. That is my recommendation to you. And that's what I hope that you have learned from today, from this exercise, is that interviewing is a skill. The curriculum here is content and process. The content of your questions need to be valid to get the kind of answers you want. Using software and using a professional interviewing and having a common set of questions speaks to reliability. But the process, again, that's reliability. That speaks to content is validity. What kind of questions do you ask? Are they aligned with the purpose that you're there for? That is validity, content validity. Let me say that again. We're interested in content validity. Do the questions that we ask match the purpose that we're there for? That's why you have to ask, why am I here? And then reliability speaks to the process that you use, making them comfortable, open-ended questions, recording, using software or a professional. That's about reliability. Content, process. Content is about validity. Process is about reliability. Make sure that you understand those two. To assure content validity, you have to ask why I'm here. Even though it may be apparent, like it was at Dixie Weaving, you have to ask to make sure. And that will shape the content of your questions. Reliable, that's self-explanatory. All right, questions you have from me from today. You understand today was about qualitative work and about assuring reliability and validity in qualitative work.
Can you say what the issue was in the other case we didn't go over?
I'll have to look at it. Let me look at it right quick. Oh, yeah. The problem here is fidelity, which is a third problem. We've talked about fidelity to make sure that programs are implemented the way they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
This one, the employees don't get along, and so because my perception on this one is because they don't get along because I do it this way and you do it that way, we can't agree. But there's nobody there. Nobody is doing fidelity checks and saying, this is how I want it to be done. Nobody is doing staff development that says, this is the way we do business. Now, I'll use myself as the bad example. On Mondays in the summer, every other Monday, during the regular year, pretty much every Monday, I do a staff meeting. I have I've told you, in the program that I'm responsible for, I have 18 adjunct professors.
Mm-hmm.
My problem, of course, then is fidelity, making sure everybody does everything the same way. But the heart of that is staff development. This is the way I want it done. And then following up to make sure it's done that way. And since I have started doing that over the last year and 3 or 4 months, it has solved a lot of my conflict problems between the adjuncts. Now, remembering that these people have to work together in groups, in small groups, specifically in teams. They have to work in 2-person teams, and then they work in pods of 4. And that I have trained them all and set the expectations, I have a lot less problem with them having conflicts among their pods or among their 2-person teams. That's the problem here, is that if you want these people to get along, when you're dealing with qualitative work like this, where you're working with people, you have to train them what you want done, and then you have to monitor them, fidelity checks to make sure that they're doing it, so that I'm a member of a team, and I don't do the things that everybody else does because I don't like that. Well, we have to have a common set of expectations, and then somebody has to make sure that we're assessing that to make sure that that's being followed through on. So the problem here is that she is growing frustrated with her employees. Employees have difficulty working together and cannot agree on how to properly run the camp. Well, see, that's not their job. That's above their pay grade. Who needs to be setting how we're going to do things? The leader of the group needs to say, this is how we do business every day. Why would employees have any say-so in how we run things? See, they're arguing among themselves because nobody's taking a leadership role to say, we're going to do professional development. This is how I want it done. And then somebody's got to follow up to make sure it's getting done that way. So this is about Olivia more than it is about her employees. If you want them not to argue about how things are run, you need to tell them how you want it run and hold them accountable to run it that way. This is about fidelity.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And fidelity is making sure that content and process are what we want them to be. That we're doing the things we want done, and we're doing them the right way, the way that we're doing the right things, and we're doing the way we want them done. That's, content and process, and that is validity and reliability. This is fidelity. This is their this is the trio here. Validity, reliability, and fidelity, making sure that what you want done gets done. You always got to have fidelity to go along with validity and reliability, content process. Okay? Good question. Anything else this morning for the good of the group? So when is it? Well, I will see you again.
28th.
Yes. Yeah.
That is correct. I will see you on the 28th. So that means that, gosh, y'all, I won't see you again for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do without you. If you need me, holler. I'm always available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Y'all all have a good Saturday. I'll see you in 3 weeks.
Okay.
You too. Thank you.